Hey everybody, Mike here in the BFH garage. Today we have a 2009 JK that they just need their shocks changed out. The old shocks have a lot of miles on them. Their ride has suffered, so now we're going to throw some new shocks on there, get them back out on the road. So if this is your first time or if you're relatively new to doing your own mechanical work on your Jeep, this is going to be a great video to show you how easy these things are to work on. Now when I say easy, I mean things are easy to kind of grasp in concept, but some things can still be a pain in your rear. So let's take a look. So anytime you're going to change out suspension components or change out your shocks, things like that, one of the first things you want to do is check the condition of the old fastening devices. Now, if you can see on top of that shock there, that's a little bit of rust. It's not terrible. I've seen worse. But rust can create all sorts of problems. So the first thing we're gonna do is spray some PB Blaster. You can use Croil, you can use anything, but you wanna get a penetrating lubricant on there in order to get these fasteners off without having them strip out. And you wanna do that first because it takes a few seconds for this stuff to penetrate. It doesn't take a whole lot, but you wanna get it on there. It takes a little bit of time to penetrate, so while you're getting everything else prepped, that can have time to work down into the threads. So in this case here, we're just using a standard replacement shock. So this customer bought the Napa brand, which will be fine for this application. Again, it's a completely stock JK, so we're just looking to restore the ride to the OEM equivalent of when it was new. So pull your shocks out of the box, give a quick inspection, make sure everything's there, then we'll get the other shocks out. And I'm gonna start with the rear. So on the rear, you have your lower bolts. That's a 18 millimeter nut there. And then on the uppers, you're gonna see back in there, they're kind of hard to get to, but you have two 5/8 bolts that will back right out of that. Now, sometimes you gotta be really careful removing those. If they get rusted on the other side and the bolt breaks off, that makes for a long day trying to get the remnants out of there to get a new one in. So just be real careful loosening those up. So sometimes these can be kind of a pain in the rear to get started because they're set pretty good with corrosion and everything. So I'll take my ratchet with an extension and then you get it to bust loose. You want to do the same thing to the other side to get it broken loose. And you can hear that, how tight that gets. And from there, you can take your impact driver and get that off of there. If you don't have an 18 millimeter socket, an 11/16 also fits over there, just a little bit more snug. So you can use that in a pinch. So before I pull that out all the way, I'm gonna get another pull jack. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna support the axle on this side. That way it doesn't droop. I can remove the shock, put the new one in right in its place. So with the pull jack sitting here, I take just enough pressure off the axle so it doesn't droop. And then this shock is at full extension. When I go to replace the next one, or when I go to replace it with the new one, then it should fit right in its place. So once you have the bolt out, you can take some sort of screwdriver or something like that, put it back in there. When I go to put the new shock in, if for some reason there's still a little bit more tension here than I need, I can tighten the jack a little bit more, screw it up, and it will line up the holes. So now we need to get the uppers out. So as stated earlier, you got to worry about some rust issues on these upper bolts, so I always break them free by hand first, just so I can get a feel for how they are and make sure that they're not seized in there. Yeah, that'll go good. Yeah, okay. So now I can take my impact and get them out the rest of the way. If you have a long extension, it does make it a little bit easier because you can kind of clear everything a little bit better. That bolt, you only have to get loose enough to get the shock out, and then we'll put the new one in its place. If everything behaves. There we go. So we have that one in there. Got to make sure everything turns so you get the bolt started. There we go. Once you get that started, you can tighten it back up. Once you get those tightened up with the impact, you can torque them down to spec. The torque spec on the upper bolt is only 37 pounds. So if you're using an impact wrench, be careful because it's easy to over tighten those beyond that 37 pounds. Your lower bolt and nut get torqued to 56. So we're going to take the shock, put it in place, make sure everything lines up, and if it doesn't, you could adjust using your jack. Slides right through. Replace your nut, and torque it down to 56. And again, if you're using an impact, stop a little bit early so you can make sure you get the proper torque on it. That side's done. We'll get the other side done and move on to the front. Now the front is a little bit more involved than the rear. The bottom shock bolt is easy to get off. The one that is a little bit more difficult is going to be that upper stem. There's a nut up on top there that we have to get off, and we have to back it up. Okay, you can see you have a welded on nut right here. That helps to back while you're trying to loosen that top stem nut. Now here's the thing, when you're trying to loosen this one, if you'll notice, you see how the entire shock just spins? That's why we need to back it up. So you take your other wrench right here, and then you start slowly doing that. I just popped my knuckle pretty good breaking it right before I turn on the video, but that's what you need to do, is back it up there, get that upper stem nut all the way off. And that's why a ratcheting wrench really comes in handy here. You can see how, if you wouldn't be able to get a socket up there, and if you're just using your box end, it would take you forever taking it on, putting it back on. And then you have your isolator up top. You'll need to make sure you get the new one on. Now you can just compress the shock with your hand and get the isolator out of there. So this one here is a flat washer that goes to the isolator. The other one will be a little bit different, I think. But that's all you need to do to get that out of there. So now the shock comes down. We can loosen the bolt on the bottom side and get it swapped right out. Simply remove the shock from the upper mount, it comes right out. I'm going to put on the lower isolator first. Now you remember the other one had a flat washer. This one here's got kind of a cup. So in this case, the cup goes up. Feed it through the stem hole up there. Place your shock back in there. And get the bolt back through. nut back on. We're going to tighten it back down. This one also gets torqued to 56. And since we already have it in there and ready to go, we'll do exactly that. Okay, we're back up top now. I'm going to need to put the upper isolator on. Now, when you look at this, you're going to see how you have a thinner bushing side here. This one here is thicker. This one will recess into the hole that's in the shock mount there. So the cup goes turned down on top of that isolator, and then we get up on top of the shock stem. But since there's hardly any room to work in there, I have to do one at a time. There we go. Then the washer cup there. And now the new nut we have is a 9/16 instead of a 5/8, so just grab whatever wrench that yours calls for. Well, that's it for this JK. Hopefully you learned something new, and it'll take you on a new adventure with your Jeep.